Okay. Oh, okay. Are we going to introduce him? Did she say that?
Our 26th annual Amah Mutsun Speaker Series. Hello, everybody. My name is Nico Hostler. I am the lead intern for the American Indian Resource Center. I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I'm from the village of Milden, located in the Hoopa Valley Reservation. Before we begin our event, please note the restrooms are located outside the back left door and to your right, and the water is located in the back of the room. I would like to now read the land acknowledgement. The land acknowledgement is at UC Santa Cruz, was developed in partnership with the Amah Mutsun Tribal Band Chairman and the Amah Mutsun Learning Program at the UCSC Arboretum. It reads as follows. The land on which we gather is the unceded territory of the Awaswa speaking Yupi tribe. The Amah Mutsun Tribal Band, comprised of the descendants of indigenous people taking the mission Santa Cruz and San Juan Bautista during Spanish colonization of the Central Coast, is today working hard to restore traditional stewardship practices on these lands and heal from historical trauma. To learn more about the Amah Mutsun Tribal Band, visit their website at amahmutsun.org. I would now like to invite Amah Mutsun Tribal Chairman, Chairman Lopez, to open up our event for today.
Very much. Welcome, everybody. It's a pleasure and honor to have you here. Again, my name is Valentin Lopez, and I'm the chairman of the Amah Mutsun Tribal Band. And our tribe is comprised of the descendants of the indigenous peoples that were taken to mission San Juan Bautista and mission Santa Cruz. This event started, if we did my math right, in 2009. 2009, I believe it was May of 2009, was our first one. It was. You had a thumbs up over here. Certified that. You too, yeah. 2 thumbs up. You know it's fun. So it's really, it's really amazing. When we first started this, there was nothing really indigenous on campus. That was open to the public as well as the people here. And they're specifically targeting the California natives. And that's what makes this right here special. The person we worked with, we developed a Mutsun Speaker Series board, which we still have going. The following members are here. And we presented a lot of things. The first couple of Mutsun Speaker Series, we talked about historic trauma. And that was an eye-opener for myself and a lot of our tribal members. And that's what got our tribe working, dealing with our wildest meetings and working on the historic trauma of our tribe. And that has been probably the most important thing that our tribe has done since I've been chair, is to deal with the issues of historic trauma. And today, I'm happy to say that, our incidents of addictions and suicide, and violence and incarceration, etc., they've actually declined quite a bit. It's just amazing how that can happen on that very first speaker series event. And since that time, we talked about a lot of other important issues as well. We talked about the environment, traditional native stewardship. We've talked about federal recognition. We've talked about adoptions and ICWA. We've talked about, we presented a lot of research that was being done by our tribal youth that are now going to universities, and we got 3 of them working on the PhDs now. They're all doing research related to the tribe and the California natives. It's just amazing. They got kicked off, all got kicked off with this speaker series. Since that time, we've also really strengthened our relationship with UC Berkeley. Excuse me, sorry. Start throwing tomatoes in there. With UC Santa Cruz, of course. And we have a 55-acre garden, Amah Mutsun garden this way. And we have all our native plants. Our members come in, knowing they can come on in and collect medicines, fruits, plants for medicines, plants for foods, basketry, etc. We're very good to come together in Willow for a sweat lodge, as a matter of fact. And we also have an excellent relationship with the environmental folks here to conduct research. With archaeology, we do a lot with the archaeology department, and we're working with them now on an issue to get our members reburied. The ancestors that were dug up here on campus, when the campus was being developed to get reburied. We have full authorization now, and so we'll be moving forward on that. It's that's the most important part, getting the ancestors back. It's a violation of our spiritual belief for them to have been disturbed. So having them back is a wonderful thing. Today's speaker is Olivia Tilka, and I've known Olivia for quite a number of years. We talked over the years on quite a number of issues. She was an integral member of the critical mission studies that occurred for the last several years now. And she's done a lot of research there. I know that her tribe, that she spent a lot of effort on her tribe's federal recognition. She's also done a lot with the subject that's going to be presented today, is how can unrecognized tribes assert their sovereignty with no federal recognition, no acknowledgement from the federal government, minimal acknowledgement from the state government, and no true acknowledgement from local governments. So I'm looking forward to today's talk, and I do thank everyone that's here, and we can begin the program now. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Lopez, for your words. We're honored to have you here with us today, as well as Dr. Chilko. Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Kimiko once again. As a California native myself, I'm very happy to be here with Amah Mutsun Tribal Band and our speaker, Dr. Chilko. The AIRC is dedicated to supporting the needs of American Indian students at UC Santa Cruz. It is one of 6 resource centers on campus, and throughout the year we host workshops and presentations that raise awareness about issues that pertain to Native people. I'm glad to be in this space with everybody today, and I appreciate you all attending our event. I would like to now pass the mic over to Kaushani to introduce our speaker for today.
My name is Kaushani Brad, and I'm a member of the Quad tribe from Texas. And I'm a 4th-year transfer student and a 2nd-year intern here at American Indian Resource Center. And I love it very much, like this event right here, so beautiful. And I'm very excited to introduce our speaker, Dr. Olivia Chilko, who's a tribal member of the San Luis Rey Band of Mission Indians and an assistant professor of American Indian Studies at San Diego State University. Dr. Chilko received her PhD and MA in the Department of Ethnic Studies at UC Berkeley and is a former Critical Mission Studies postdoctoral fellow in the Department of History at UC Riverside. Dr. Chilko's presentation will discuss how non-federally recognized tribes in California assert inherent tribal sovereignty via government-to-government relations with the state and argue this opens possibilities for official state recognition. If you have any questions during the event, Please hold them until the end of the presentation, and you can share them during our Q&A session. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Chilko.
Wow, that was the definition of a warm welcome. I have both my hands for you. Everyone can hear me okay? Okay, so just want to start off by saying thank you so much to the Amah Mutsun Tribal Band, the Chairman Lopez, to the American Indian Resource Center here at UC Santa Cruz for in this long-standing series. So everyone has been so incredibly welcoming and helpful, and all of the interns are so amazing. So to meet you all. I also want to thank Kennedy Creighton, a former San Diego State Union student who offered to pick me up from the airport this morning. So amazing. I love our SDSU community. And then to everyone who's here and watching on Zoom for taking time out on the weekend, on Saturday, to hear my presentation and learn some more about this topic. Next slide. So I also just wanted to thank you for reading the land acknowledgement, and to just also say that I'm really grateful to be here in the Amah Mutsun Tribal Territory, and it's just been, as Chairman Lopez mentioned, it's been such a great honor to get to know him and other tribal members throughout the years. We were just talking before this, like maybe 2011, I guess, around the time when I started grad school at UC Berkeley, and ever since then we've just been in so many of the same spaces and advisory boards or whatever they may be together, and so it's been really great to get to know Chairman Lopez and other members of the Amah Mutsun Tribal Band. Next slide. And so also I just wanted to in terms of land acknowledgements, we know that that's just one part, and so it's really important to have action associated with acknowledgements. So before I came here, I made sure to sign the petition to save Uristack, and also made a donation to the Amah Mutsun Land Trust. So I just wanted to do that to really make it known that I am really appreciative of being here. Next slide. So this is what we are going to be speaking about today. So my presentation, as was mentioned, I will be talking about inherent tribal sovereignty for non-federally recognized tribes here in California, and how tribes without federal recognition are able to assert their inherent sovereignty through government-to-government relationships and engagement with the state of California specifically, and how maybe that opens possibilities for something like discussions around formal state acknowledgement. Next slide. So absence of federal recognition does not preclude a tribe from exercising inherent tribal sovereignty, asserting an indigenous identity, or undertaking cultural revitalization. Non-federally recognized tribes across the country assert sovereignty in ways that support community self-determination goals, even as they grapple with their liminal legal status. Non-federally recognized tribes like my own, the San Luis Band and Mission Indians, exercise sovereignty every single day as functioning tribal governments, despite lack of federal recognition. As one tribal member in my community put it, we're an unrecognized tribe, but we can't think that way. This statement gets to the core of how the San Luis Band and other non-federally recognized tribes actively assert sovereignty, maintain cultural integrity, determine their futures, and affirm connections to traditional territories. Non-federally recognized tribes like the San Luis Band are governments positioned to choose how they exercise inherent tribal sovereignty to further community-based ideals and political influence. One primary method the San Luis Band and other non-federally recognized tribes in California use to assert inherent tribal sovereignty is government-to-government relationships with municipalities, counties, and state California. The San Luis Band's assertion of inherent tribal sovereignty via government-to-government engagement is made possible through the definition of a California Native American tribe codified in state law. A California Native American tribe can be a federally recognized tribe or not, so long as it's on the contact list maintained by California's Native American Heritage Commission. So again, in my presentation, I'll be arguing that California promotes non-federally recognized tribal sovereignty and explores how presence on the Native American Heritage Commission's contact list might be a pathway to California's formal acknowledgement of non-federally recognized tribes. Oh, wait. Okay, so I want to start off by talking about inherent tribal sovereignty, just so we can kind of get on the same page with some of the terminology I'm using. And I'm talking about non-federally recognized tribes, so I do want to briefly mention what federal recognition means, so that you can have an understanding of some of the stakes involved. Next slide for you. So federally recognized tribal status indicates that the United States acknowledges a tribe's inherent sovereignty. A federally recognized tribal sovereignty means that tribes have a government-to-government relationship with the United States. The government-to-government relationship with tribes also extends to federal agencies such as the National Park Service and the United States Forest Service that control tribally significant lands and natural resources. Federal agencies are required to consult with federally recognized tribes and provide for certain access and use rights not given to others. Federal recognition of inherent sovereignty also affirms the federal government's obligation to tribes through a legal doctrine of federal Indian trust responsibility. The trust responsibility is a cornerstone of federal Indian law that originates from almost 400 treaties made between the United States and tribes. Simply put, the trust responsibility means the federal government has a duty and a moral obligation to fulfill its promises to tribes and support tribal self-government. In practice, however, we know the federal government broke treaties and instead used the trust responsibility as an instrument that caters to the government's own interests in harmful ways to Native peoples. Now, you can hear of the war to the guardian status, assimilation policies, boarding schools, etc., that were supposed to be in the interest of tribes. But contemporarily, the trust responsibility is viewed as a source of federal responsibility and a means by which Congress created numerous programs and services for the benefit of Native peoples and tribes because of tribes' inherent political status as sovereign nations. Federally recognized tribes have access to federal resources and programs that provide assistance, services, or funding opportunities related to housing, medical, education, employment, and land development. In addition to critical resource access, federally recognized tribes have enforceable power and are able to exercise jurisdiction over their own reservation lands. Federal recognition gives tribes enforceable power to have ancestors' remains and cultural items repatriated through federal statutes, like the Native American Heritage Repatriation Act, to have control over the welfare of tribal youth in foster care and adoption proceedings through the Indian Child Welfare Act, which keeping up with the current news, that is something that is currently under attack and going to be argued in front of the Supreme Court coming up next week. So really timely. And also, tribes have the power to legally acquire and use federally protected items, such as eagle feathers, traditional religious and cultural practices. And again, these rights are all because of tribes' political status. Next one. There are currently 574 federally recognized tribes in the United States, 109 of which are in California, and there are approximately 400 non-federally recognized tribes across the country. Tribal sovereignty, or the right to self-government, is the most fundamental concept in the tribal-federal relationship. All tribes, whether federally recognized or not, retain their inherent pre-constitutional sovereignty. Tribal sovereignty is considered inherent because tribes possess government systems and powers prior to Euro-American colonization. Sovereignty is not given to tribes. The Supreme Court deliberated on the principle of inherent tribal sovereignty in the 1832 Worcester v. Georgia case. Worcester was one of three influential decisions made by the Supreme Court in the 1800s that provide the foundation of federal human law. Chief Justice John Marshall's opinion in the court in Worcester underscored the logic behind inherent tribal sovereignty. Quote, the Indian nations have always been considered as distinct, independent political communities, and the settled doctrine of the law of nations is that a weaker power does not surrender its independence, its right to self-government by association with a stronger entity protection. Chief Justice John Marshall's statement is problematic for the way it describes Native nations as weak and inferior to the United States, particularly in the sense alliances with tribes as 60 years earlier played a crucial role in the Revolutionary War. However, the language of Worcester followed established precedent in international law that recognized that governments do not give up sovereignty integrated into the American sovereignty. Chief Justice John Marshall also noted in Worcester that the United States treaty relationship with tribes was evidence that tribes were considered nations. The principle of inherent tribal sovereignty set in Worcester remains integral to contemporary relationships between tribes, states, and federal government. Inherent tribal sovereignty is the basis of the American political or official identity that distinguishes indigenous people and tribes from other citizens in the United States. While critiques exist that sovereignty is an environmental political objective, many tribes and native people still consider the concept of including the U.S. legal system as meaningful despite its origins in Western law. From a tribal perspective, creators gifted native peoples in sovereignty at the beginning of time, and so of course it was sovereignty forever, so we find a term for that concept. But tribal laws and diplomatic traditions were passed down from generation to the next. Sovereignty via creation indicates that tribes always retain an original sovereignty, but colonial governments intentionally seek to limit sovereignty and steal resources and lands from tribes to control people and places. Tribal sovereignty, defined by David E. Wilkins and Heidi Stark as distinct from the Western concept of sovereignty, is, quote, the spiritual, moral, and dynamic cultural force within a given tribal community, empowering the group toward political, economic, and most important, cultural integrity, and toward maturity in the group's relationships with its own members, with other peoples and their governments, and with the environment. In California, there are 62 non-federally recognized tribal governments that retain inherent rights to self-government and the responsibility to exercise those powers to determine tribal futures. So, as mentioned, one primary method that my tribe and other non-federally recognized tribes in California use to assert inherent tribal sovereignty is government-to-government relationships with counties, municipalities, and the state of California. State statutes, governor's executive orders and policies, state agency policies, and various memoranda of understandings empower the San Luis Band and other non-federally recognized tribes in California to assert inherent tribal sovereignty in government capacity. Next slide. Key to tribal inclusion in government-to-government relationships is the legal definition of what represents a tribe in California. In 2004, Senate Bill 18, the Traditional Tribal Cultural Places Law, mandated cities and counties participate in government-to-government consultations with California Native American tribes on local land use decisions in the early stages of planning to protect or mitigate impacts to culturally significant places. Senate Bill 18 amended California's Civil and Government Code to term a California Native American tribe as one on the Native American Heritage Commission's contact list. The Native American Heritage Commission's contact list, sometimes called the consultation list, facilitates the exercise of non-federally recognized tribe sovereignty by empowering tribes to participate in government-to-government relationships. Next slide. The Native American Heritage Commission is the primary state agency charged with identifying and cataloging cultural resources, preventing damage to sacred sites and Native American cemeteries, and preventing interference with Native American religious practices. Maintaining a contact list of tribes in California is essential for the Native American Heritage Commission to perform its legally mandated duties. The Native American Heritage Commission's contact list is used to determine which tribes meet the statutory definition of a California Native American tribe. The contact list is routinely utilized to determine tribal eligibility to engage in consultations for land use planning, as well as consultations related to the California Environmental Quality Act, but the list applicability spans a wide range. The Native American Heritage Commission states that in order for non-federally recognized tribes included on the list, those tribes, quote, must provide documentation that their members are descended from a historical California tribe and currently operate as a tribal governmental body that carries out general governmental functions for its members. And this image on here is a portion of what those requirements are, what meet those requirements for non-federal recognition to be on. The Native American Heritage Commission's contact list has become an authoritative source of information on tribes in California and one that holds significant power. Since 2021, the Native American Heritage Commission began a process to develop regulations regarding qualifications and process for placement on the contact list. Draft contact list regulations are projected to be available January 2023 for tribal consultation and comment. After various rounds of comment and revision, the Commission expects the final regulations to be adopted in July 2024 and published with the Secretary of State in October of 2024 as well. And so I am definitely going to be following this high-stakes process, since the list is very powerful and its definitional authority, and this will no doubt be a site for contestation over Indigenous and tribal identity, which is another aspect of my research that I've been used. The definition of a California Native American tribe as one that is on the Native American Heritage Commission's contact list is regularly used in state statutes and policies to facilitate tribal self-determination and self-government. For example, Section 815.3 of the Civil Code states, quote, a federally recognized California Native American tribe or a non-federally recognized California Native American tribe that is on the contact list maintained by the Native American Heritage Commission may acquire or hold conservation easement. Conservation easements are intended to preserve land in its quote, natural, scenic, historical, agricultural, forested, or open space condition through the voluntary transfer of real property interests for perpetuity and for all successive landowners. Non-federally recognized California tribes' eligibility to hold conservation easements and therefore hold property rights is directly linked to the Native American contact list. In other words, the contact list qualifies non-federally recognized tribes to be granted certain property interests and or rights not available otherwise. Entering a cultural conservation easement is an act of self-government for tribes and a form of land reclamation in line with other land back efforts employed by tribes across the country. The San Luis Band, for instance, elected to enter multiple conservation easement agreements as a way to protect sacred sites. And I know that many other tribes have as well, including the Amah Mutsun Tribal Band. The California let's see, next slide. Sorry.
It's okay.
The California legislature promotes the exercise of non-federally recognized tribes' inherent sovereignty through approximately 30 different state statutes that incorporate or reference the Native American Heritage Commission's contact list. Oh, you did, I think.
Go back.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. California Government Code, Civil Code, Code of Civil Procedure, Fish and Game Code, Public Resources Code, Water Code, Health and Safety Code, and Education Code all contain language that includes California Native American tribes recorded on the Native American Heritage Commission's contact list. Since the definition of a California Native American tribe includes non-federally recognized tribes, state statutes that include the contact list open and widen possibilities for tribes to enact inherent tribal sovereignty through government-to-government consultation, co-management and co-stewardship of natural resources, funding opportunities, land reclamation, and much more. So, here's some examples you can see from the government code statutes. Government code, civil code, civil code procedure. So again, just sort of bolded where it uses this language. And then to the next slide as well, just to really drive this point home. How relevant it is. So again, and like I said, there's approximately 30 and probably more than that, but just from pulling through everyone can look at the laws that are passed in California online, so just doing like a subject word search, coming up with a lot of these, but also the Native American Heritage Commission lists some of these as well. So again, just really pointing out that this language is really prevalent. Okay, so in administrative policies generated by California's two most recent governors, Edmund G. Jerry Brown Jr. and Gavin Newsom, further reinforced government-to-government engagement with all tribes regardless of federally recognized status. Next slide. In 2011, Governor Jerry Brown issued Executive Order B-1011, proclaiming California's commitment to, quote, strengthening and sustaining effective government-to-government relationships with California tribes. Originally California governor from 1975 to 1983, Governor Brown established the Native American Heritage Commission in 1976 after signing Assembly Bill 4239 into law. In alignment with his previous administration's support of California tribes, Governor Brown's second administration from 2011 to 2019 began with Executive Order B-1011's, quote, recognition and reaffirmation of California tribal sovereignty. Governor Brown issued Executive Order B-1011 soon after Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger's notoriously anti-tribal administration came to an end, making the timing especially noteworthy for California tribes. Given California's relationship with tribes affirmed in state law up to that point, Executive Order B-1011 created the position of a tribal advisor to oversee the implementation of meaningful government-to-government consultation with California tribes on relevant issues and policies. And that's an image of the current tribal advisor, Ian Snyder. California state agencies and departments subject to Governor Brown's executive control were also ordered to encourage communication and consultation with California Indian tribes for the purpose of providing, quote, meaningful input into the development of legislation, regulations, rules, and policies on matters that may affect tribal communities. Executive Order B-1011 stated the term California Indian tribe included federally recognized tribes and other California Native Americans. The other California Native Americans meant non-federally recognized tribes. Drawing on established definitions of a California Native American tribe elsewhere in state statutes, the terminology in B-1011 created a major shift in state practices towards the broad inclusion of non-federally recognized tribes in government-to-government consultation. Since Executive Order B-1011's original release, state legislators and agencies heeded the call to strengthen government-to-government relationships with California tribes, thus giving non-federally recognized tribes more opportunities to assert inherent tribal sovereignty. Next slide. Executive Order B-1011 sentiment, combined with a high-profile theft of petroglyphs sacred to the Bishop Paiute tribe and several intense fights to protect sacred sites, led former Assemblyman Mike Gatto, who's a Democrat from Los Angeles, and Luis Alejo, who was a Democrat from Watsonville, to author Assembly Bill 52, or AB 52. Introduced to the California legislature in December of 2012, AB 52 proposed to amend the California Environmental Quality Act to recognize California tribes' expertise on cultural resources. The 1970 California Environmental Quality Act did not originally contain specific provisions related to California Native American tribes' concerns or expertise. AB 52 created a formal procedure for including California Native American tribal governments in the California Environmental Quality Act consultation process to mitigate further impacts, environmental impacts to tribal cultural resources and sacred places. Supporters acclaimed AB 52 because it would give tribes more power and responsibility in the consultation process by forcing every lead agency to consult with California Native American tribes from the inception of the project. While AB 52's intent was lauded, many were actually against the bill because it only defined a California Native American tribe as one that was federally recognized. The bill's language made non-federally recognized tribes into interested parties, just like the public, which was a direct affront to non-federally recognized tribes' inherent sovereignty. Moreover, the exclusion of non-federally recognized tribes went against Executive Order B-1011's call for meaningful and effective government-to-government consultation with all California Native American tribes. The Salience Band's chief legal counsel at the time explained, quote, "They literally cut the non-federally recognized tribes out." AB 52's changes to the California Environmental Quality Act would also create conflicting definitions of the California Native American tribe encoded in state law because Senate Bill 18, that was passed in 2004, and the California Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act of 2001 included non-federally recognized tribes in their definitions of a California tribe. The Salience Band and other non-federally recognized tribes could see that exclusion from the California Environmental Quality Act would have disastrous impacts on their ability to protect and preserve tribal cultural resources and heritage made possible through government-to-government consultations. The Salience Band and other tribes across the state fought to revise the bill's language. One of my duties, revealed the Salience Band's former chief legal counsel, was to fight the definition in AB 52 because if it went through, the tribe would be cut out. The tribe would still have Senate Bill 18 and hope that the definition wouldn't be retroactive, but there's no guarantees. The Salience Band wrote public comment letters, submitted testimony, visited California legislators' offices, and utilized assembly floor alerts to express resistance to the bill's language. The Salience Band and other non-federally recognized tribes' advocacy successfully resulted in changes to AB 52 that included an expansive definition of the California Native American tribe, ensuring non-federally recognized tribe rights in the California Environmental Quality Act's consultation process. The California legislature passed the revised version of AB 52 in August of 2014, and Governor Brown approved the bill in September of that year. As evidenced by the strong push to secure non-federally recognized tribes' place within state law, protecting and managing sacred sites is one of the most important arenas in which non-federally recognized tribes in California exercise inherent sovereignty via government-to-government consultation processes. Senate Bill 18 and AB 52 enable California Native American tribes, again, with the expansive definition and as being on the Native American Heritage Commission's contact list, to participate in government-to-government consultations. Though their implementation has had mixed success, Senate Bill 18's and AB 52's provisions for consultation with California Native American tribes ensures tribes' ability to protect cultural resources by recommending mitigation measures that will avoid or significantly lessen impacts to those resources. For many years, non-federally recognized tribes like the Salience Band primarily asserted inherent tribal sovereignty through government-to-government consultation in the cultural resource protection and preservation sphere. That began to change after Governor Gavin Newsom reaffirmed government-to-government engagement with tribes in his 2019 Executive Order N-1519 and a 2020 Statement of Administration Policy. Next slide. Although it did not explicitly mention the word genocide, Executive Order N-1519 apologized, quote, "on behalf of the citizens of the state of California to all California Native Americans for the many instances of violence, mistreatment, and neglect California inflicted on tribes for over a century." Executive Order N-1519 brought newfound public attention to the atrocities committed against California Indians at the hands of the state, some of which remain ongoing, particularly in terms of land dispossession. Executive Order N1519 reasserted and incorporated the principles of Executive Order B1011 with specific reference made to government engagement and consultation on policies that may impact tribal communities. Since its release, state legislators heeded Executive Order N1519 and regularly incorporate the term California Native American tribe in new legislative efforts to include non-federally recognized tribes in statutes that extend beyond cultural resource protection. Executive Order N1519 also charged the Governor's Tribal Advisor with the task of establishing and leading a Truth and Healing Council. Next slide. Here they are. Here are the council members. The Truth and Healing Council is intended to, quote, bear witness to, record, examine existing documentation of, and receive California Native American narratives regarding the historical relationship between the state of California and California Native Americans in order to clarify the historical record of this relationship in the spirit of truth and healing. The Truth and Healing Council will submit a final report on the historical relationship between the state of California and California tribes to the governor by January 1st, 2025. The final report will make recommendations aimed at the, quote, reparation and restoration of the victims, survivors, descendants, and communities subjected to California's genocidal policies. Governor Newsom's Executive Order N1519 reaffirms California's willingness to engage in government-to-government relationships with non-federally recognized tribes and provides a venue to address the role the California government and various state actors played in contemporary tribal legal status. Next slide. On September 25th, 2020, Governor Newsom followed up Executive Order N1519 with a statement of administration policy relating to Native American ancestral lands. The statement referenced both Executive Order N1519 and Executive Order B1011 to reiterate the state's commitment to government engagement with tribes. Governor Newsom stated it is his administration's policy to encourage every state department, agency, board, and commission under his executive control, quote, to seek opportunities to support California tribes' co-management of and access to natural lands that are within a California tribe's ancestral land and under, maybe that means, maybe it was ancestral territory. Got to go back and check the quote. And under the ownership or control of the state of California, and to work cooperatively with California tribes that are interested in acquiring natural lands in excess of state needs. Co-management and access permissions are core substitutes for outright land return that ultimately uphold California's role in settler colonialism. While the statement of administration policy maintains the settler colonial framework, one of its intended purposes is to meaningfully support tribal self-determination and self-government, two fundamental aspects of inherent tribal sovereignty through tribal connection to ancestral lands. This year, Governor Newsom continued to support tribal partnerships with the state for shared climate and conservation goals. Governor Newsom allocated $100 million over the next 2 years for a tribal nature-based solution program. And that program is connected to another executive order, N8220, which was regarding nature-based solutions for climate change. And the California tribes in consultations were willing to offer solutions that they have with our traditional ecological knowledge and express willingness to partner with the state on those goals. So the new program that's being funded, that $100 million can be used to fund various activities such as land return, co-management, and capacity building for California Native American tribes, which includes non-federally recognized tribes as well. Indigenous peoples the world over contend with ongoing threats to their ancestral lands and sacred landscapes, both tangible and intangible. Regardless of federal recognition status, California tribes seek to consistently connect, engage, and steward their tribal territories however possible. All tribes utilize a wide range of tools and techniques to gain access, stewardship, and authority over culturally important lands. Next slide. Since 2020, several California tribes entered into new government-to-government agreements with state agencies for co-management purposes. The California Department of Fish and Wildlife entered into a memorandum of agreement with the Bishop Paiute Tribe and the Bear River Band of Winterville Rancheria, as well as a memorandum of understanding with the Tolowa Dini Nation. The San Luis Band of Mission Indians and the Amah Mutsun Tribal Band, both non-federally recognized tribes, entered memoranda of understanding with the California Department of State Parks. A uniform definition of co-management of natural resources does not currently exist in California, so tribes construct co-management agreements with state agencies given the limitations from authorizing statutes and regulations under which state agencies operate. Next slide. Other than the Amah Mutsun Tribal Band, the San Luis Band of Mission Indians is the only non-federally recognized tribe with a memorandum of understanding with California state parks. We were trying really hard to beat you, but you guys did it first.
That was a race.
Yeah. So yeah, so theirs was 2021. Ours was just earlier this year, 2022. So the San Luis Band's memorandum of understanding established and formalized a consultation relationship between the San Luis Band and state parks. A primary goal of the MOU is to foster a shared stewardship approach to 6 units within the state park system: cultural and natural resource management, activities related to traditional cultural practices, and the co-creation of educational and interpretive materials for 6 parks and beaches are some of the shared plans outlined in the MOU. In creating the government-to-government agreement, the San Luis Band asserted its inherent sovereignty and generated opportunities to continue to do so through consultations and collaboration with state parks that will ultimately benefit the tribal community's efforts towards cultural protection and revitalization. Next slide. Government-to-government engagement with non-federally recognized tribes found on the Native American Heritage Commission's contact list is legally required in California. Non-federally recognized tribes on the contact list exercise inherent tribal sovereignty in a government-to-government capacity with California on a scale rarely seen elsewhere in the United States. California acknowledges non-federally recognized tribal sovereignty through approximately 30 state statutes, governor's executive orders and policies, and existing state agency policies and various memoranda of understandings. Non-federally recognized tribes act on available state rights and opportunities for government-to-government engagement that support shared goals or promote tribal upliftment. Writing on tribal state relations, Native American legal scholar Matthew L.M. Fletcher argued, quote, "Each time a state or local government agrees to negotiate with an Indian tribe and then to execute a binding agreement with an Indian tribe, that non-Indian government is recognizing the legitimacy of the tribal government," end quote. In many ways, then, inclusion on the Native American Heritage Commission's contact list as a requirement to be considered a California Native American tribe represents a type of formal state acknowledgement. Next slide. So what could potentially be California's next step? Next slide. So California does not currently have an official process to acknowledge tribes, nor does it have any statutes that legally acknowledge a tribe. The California legislature issued 2 joint resolutions, one in 1993 for the Juanito Band of Mission Indians and another in 1994 for the Gabrielino Tongva Nation to support the tribe's respective requests for federal acknowledgement from the United States government. The joint resolution for the Gabrielino Tongva Nation also stated, quote, "The state of California recognizes the Gabrielino Tongva Nation as the Aboriginal tribe of Los Angeles Basin and takes great pride in recognizing the Indian inhabitants of the Los Angeles Basin and the continued existence of the Indian community within our state," end quote. Despite the recognition rhetoric used by the legislature, joint resolutions in California do not have the force of law. Joint resolutions only express the opinion of the California legislature in matters related to the federal government. Although the Juanito Band of Mission Indians and the Gabrielino Tongva Nation are often named as state-recognized tribes, they are not legally acknowledged by California state law. Next slide. Lack of federal recognition and a difficulty tribes face in gaining federal recognition from the United States is directly linked to the California government's treatment of tribes. California's militia laws and state-financed expeditions against Indians produced a violent and horrific genocide against California Indians that deeply impacted tribal communities. Under a genocidal legal system, California prevented the ratification of 18 treaties between the federal government and California Indian tribes, thus preventing the federal government's acknowledgement of several tribes that are not recognized today, including my own tribe, the San Luis Band. We had a signer on the Treaty of Temecula in 1852. Historian James Rawls revealed, quote, the most important reason for the rejection of the treaties was the vigorous opposition to them from the California congressional delegation, end quote. The California congressional delegation expressed the anti-treaty sentiments of the California governor, the state legislature, and most California citizens to the United States Senate that then rejected the treaties in a secret session. Historians Damon B. Akins and William Bauer Jr. explained, quote, California disenfranchised, disarmed, and legalized the indenture, if not outright slavery of indigenous people, end quote, through early state laws and policies like the 1850 Act for the Government and Protection of Indians and the California Constitution's prohibition of Indian suffrage. The California legislature generated laws that controlled California Indian lands and lives that counties and townships then enforced and implemented. The rapid encroachment of settlers to California, combined with state and federal laws, dispossessed many California Indians of their lands and created an environment that suppressed tribal governance. In light of Executive Order in 1519's apology and the Truth and Healing Council's ability to make recommendations aimed at reparation and restoration for state-sanctioned depredations and prejudicial policies, how should California address its role in shaping contemporary legal status? And this is part of a series. This image on the left is this series by Harry Fonseca Maidu of his interpretation of the discovery of gold in California. So I often use this in my classes when I'm teaching about the gold rush. And then this is a picture of Fulton Hall in Monterey, where the first California Constitution was signed. It was really weird experience going there. But if you're ever in that area, you should check it out. Next one. One option is for the California legislature to formalize this acknowledgement of non-federally recognized tribes in the state. As I've presented here, the state of California already acknowledges non-federally recognized tribe sovereignty in a multitude of ways, including through government-to-government relationships, which, if you recall from the beginning of my presentation, is the basis of federal recognition. There are currently 13 states that recognize over 60 tribes, and here's a map of them. Alabama, Connecticut, Delaware, Georgia, Louisiana, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Jersey, New York, North Carolina, South Carolina, Vermont, and Virginia all have formal processes to acknowledge tribe sovereignty. Creating this map really gave me a really great refresher on United States geography. True California. Scholars of state recognition explain that it, quote, operates as a means for states to acknowledge the longstanding existence of specific, inherently sovereign Indian tribes within state borders, and can be a means to address and rectify centuries of oppressive policies and practices with regard to tribal nations. States' power to acknowledge tribes is a highly understudied area of the United States federalist system, but the federal government has affirmed states' constitutional authority to recognize tribes repeatedly. State recognition is endorsed and legitimized by the federal government through the provision of certain rights and resources. Next slide. Here. Acknowledgement from a state can be an alternative to federal recognition that helps some fairly recognized tribes provide for their communities. The Indian Arts and Craft Act of 1990, a truth in advertising law that prohibits false marketing of any art or craft product of Indian made, defines an Indian person as a member of a federally or state recognized tribe. The United States Departments of Housing and Urban Development, Labor, Education, and Health and Human Services have statutory and regulatory authority to provide funding for state recognized tribes and tribal members. With official state acknowledgement, non-federally recognized California tribes could access federal resources as well as other forms of aid, including certain scholarships, funding opportunities, or health and wellness services and programs earmarked for state recognized tribes and tribal members. And that could have the potential to be transformative for some tribes that really need those resources. In some cases, official state acknowledgement can aid tribes in securing federal recognition. The Shinnecock Nation of New York became the 565th federally recognized tribe in October 2010, after over 3 decades of struggle with the Bureau of Indian Affairs and the Department of the Interior. And after suing the Department of the Interior, a federal judge stated that the Shinnecock Nation was recognized based on the overwhelming evidence of their longstanding presence within and recognition by the state of New York. And 4 of the 6 Virginia tribes that were federally recognized in 2017 were first officially recognized by Virginia. I will note too that it definitely depends on the state and the historical context and relationship with the tribes, because there's also been instances of, like in Connecticut, for example, where they're not supportive of the state recognized tribes gaining federal recognition, and that has a lot to do with, unfortunately. And the Shinnecock Nation and state recognized tribes in Virginia also had state reservation lands. A state reservation provides a land base to facilitate community cohesion in a way that might not be possible for non-federally recognized tribes that have no land or central place for tribal members to gather or for tribal governance to occur. Critics of state recognition, next slide. Critics of state recognition rightfully point out that it must be understood within the historical context of tribal-state relationships because states have long been opponents to tribal sovereignty. The 1886 Supreme Court opinion in United States versus Kodama captured the political conflict. Quote, because of local ill feeling, the people of the states where Indian tribes are found are often their deadliest enemies. The deadliest enemies hypothesis or deadliest enemies model of tribal-state relations is a longstanding narrative within federal Indian law, case opinions, and scholarship. And we can think of, I think, one of the most explicit examples was Georgia and how they were very hostile to Cherokee Nation, leading to the Trail of Tears. Noted Lumbee professor of law, Robert A. Williams Jr. wrote that Native peoples can look to history to clearly see that, quote, white racial power organized through state governments represents the greatest and most persistent threat to Indian rights and cultural survival on this continent, end quote. And California Indians know this all too well, as survivors of the vicious genocide condoned and perpetrated by the California government and its citizens. Through Executive Order N-1519, the California government openly acknowledged how, quote, violence, exploitation, dispossession, and the attempted destruction of tribal communities, and quote, characterized early tribal state relations. Native American legal scholar Matthew Ellen Fletcher argued that while violent interactions between states and tribes are historical realities, quote, Indian tribes and states must move away from the deadliest enemies model and instead embrace a new political relationship. As discussed today, the state of California and tribes work in dynamic ways that acknowledge inherent tribal sovereignty and earnestly move away from a deadliest enemies relationship. The timing is more crucial than ever to, let's see, next slide. The timing is more crucial than ever to engage in conversations that seriously consider official state acknowledgement for non-federally recognized tribes in California. The Native American Heritage Commission's contact list, promotion of inherent tribal sovereignty, the Truth and Healing Council's ability to make recommendations toward reparation, and governor's executive orders and policies create an environment where we cannot ignore the question of official state acknowledgement any longer. How can California be accountable to non-federally recognized tribes? If discussing the possibility of formal state acknowledgement occurs, non-federally recognized tribes in the state might revisit what was negotiated in the unratified treaties or propose ways to return significant amounts of land to non-federally recognized tribes dispossessed of their traditional villages. Such as, again, that's what happened to my tribe. We were dispossessed of our village and we were never given a reservation. And that is a history that has so many tribes just like this. Non-federally recognized California tribes know too well how flawed the concept of recognition can be. And I think I might be able to speak for everyone when we say that we do not want to replicate the federal acknowledgement process, the federal way to gain recognition, and produce the same issues tribes have faced for decades all over again. We don't want California to have power over us. Let's disrupt colonial structures and instead work towards respectful coexistence among all beings, lands, and waters. Imagining possibilities and determining our collective futures is a fundamental aspect of tribal nationhood and a responsibility to our communities, ancestors, and future generations. Thank you. Next slide. Last slide. Dr. Schneider.
Hello, Dr. Chopra. Thank you for that really wonderful talk. It's great to see the trajectory of the research since the old days of Berkeley. I'm just trying to wrap my brain around sort of where's the entry point for communities that want to get onto the Native American heritage list. And I understand like the focus here is on the state level, kind of looking up towards Washington and the federal government. But I also wonder how this sort of interacts with like local politics, municipalities, and local ordinances. Are there efforts that you can kind of think about maybe in your territory of going for county park access, other kinds of easements or MOUs at sort of that lower level? That's maybe a way to build up to that state recognition. That's
really great comment and question. And yeah, I think that happens a lot. For example, just on Wednesday, the city of Oceanside issued a proclamation, formally recognizing my tribe and that, Native American Heritage Month, for that, like honoring the Sailor Band, and then, all the same years as well. And so those kinds of things do happen, on the more local level, and also through some of the consultation, like 8052, Senate Bill 18, those are state, but they the agencies that tribes are consulting with or have those mandates to consult with are usually city governments. So city governments are usually the lead agencies in those consultations. And so tribes are always interacting with the local governments on cultural resource protections, for example. And I know that there are instances of, like through the mitigation that is created through those consultations, there have been things like parks or other places that are preserved. I know a lot of times we don't, and as you would know really well, a lot of times we don't even know about those things because they're trying to protect those resources, and we don't want people like going there and knowing that those exist there because we don't want people, messing with our ancestors. So I think that it happens, every day that tribes, both federal and non-federal, are engaging on that local level. But in terms of non-federally recognized tribes, it is again part of that way to assert our sovereignty and interact in a governmental capacity with other governments.
It's okay. I'm just a little confused. I'm a member of the Ohlone Coast and North Esselen Nation. We are not federally recognized, but my tribal chairperson said that we were state recognized. So is there a difference between, because now I'm understanding we are not, is there a difference between state acknowledged and state recognized?
Okay, so that is a really great question. And I myself was confused by this too, because I always thought that the Weneno and the Tonga were, because that's just kind of what has always stated. But there's no actual laws in California that formally acknowledge or recognize a tribe. I think that it kind of reminds me of the issue with the California Indian Judgment Rules, where people who were on the California Indian Judgment Rules, which is like a census of California Indians, think that like, I'm on this list that was created by the federal government. How can I not be federally recognized? You know,
Yes, that's what happened exactly with us.
yeah, exactly. So I think that disconnect happens a lot, and then that happens on the state level, like you're saying, where you know the contact list of the Native American Heritage Commission. You know, I think sometimes that is can be conflated with state recognition as well. Like, oh, we're on this contact list. We are participating in these government relationships, or have access to these to participate in the various laws or whatever it may be. And that seems, like you are state recognized, but there is nothing official on the books that.
The way I explained that is that we are state recognized for consultation under Senate Bill 18 only. And 18 is consultant general plans or general plans.
Okay, so.
Yeah, so it's again, there's no statewide and uniform understanding of that. And so that's kind of what I was getting at the end of the presentation, where since there isn't anything official that exists, like could these conversations begin of a way to maybe make this something that is official and across the board.
Yes.
And that if tribes think that's if non-federally recognized tribes think that's a good option or path forward, then that's something that we should start seriously considering.
Right.
So a wonderful presentation. Thank you for that attribution slide. This slide.
Oh, thank you.
I appreciate that. And I just have some questions, more of a comment regarding the state recognition. Like everyone else, now I have that clarified as well, because I work with the Michigan tribes, and I noticed on your map, when they're talking about the repatriation consortiums, they say it's comprised of federally recognized and state recognized tribes. But I noticed that Michigan was missing, right?
Yeah.
So, the process can be, as you explained so well to us about California and the nuances of that. So as I said, it was really important for that clarification for me. And also another state too that I think you'll hear some tribes say that we have state recognition is Ohio. I name some of the Shawnees, but there's not an official, state designation. And one of I just have more of a comment. I was really, in terms of the state recognition process, I attended online a conference, and the Vermont tribes and the Vermont Abenaki tribes, they are state recognized. But there is a major controversy and issue with that, with the Odanak Abenaki in Canada, who claim that the state of Vermont have recognized tribal nations that are not tribal nations. And that the Abenaki, again, I'm no expert, but what I learned from their session was that the Abenaki actually fled to Canada. So the descendants of the Vermont Abenaki are actually the So are there ways in terms of process? I just want to, just find out your thoughts on that. Because I know there's those kinds of discussions regarding recognition processes in other states as well.
Yeah, thank you for that. So with regards to your first comment, so there's a good book chapter that talks about the different ways that states recognize tribes. And so they were kind of talking about it in a very broad sense. So there's like different types, but the official like state legislature recognition of tribes, those are the ones I had on there. But there are other ways that sometimes seem, you know, like that a state has recognized a tribe, but that might just be similar to how it was confused in California, where it's like there's this joint resolution that it makes it seem like they're state recognized, but there isn't the force of law attached to it, or you know, similar instances of that. So I'm not sure what's going on in some of the other states as well, like Michigan, I think you mentioned. So I'm not sure. I have to look back, but that could be again why the language of state recognition is used, but it may not have that same legal backing. And then so yeah, the issues around tribal identity is a big one, and I didn't put it in the presentation, but I knew it would come up because it is a really big consideration, and I think that those debates come up a lot in terms of like dubious descent or heritage groups that have sought state recognition. I think comes up a lot too with Cherokee nations and the different groups that also claim Cherokee heritage and things like that. And so there are real issues that come, identity-based issues that come up, and I really, you heard it here first, I predict that issue is going to come up in California as well if these conversations are taken seriously and start to happen. And I think we even can kind of start seeing some of that happening already with the Native American Heritage Commission's contact list in terms of what tribes are on there, can tribes be taken off, what means by which, should a tribe be removed, how can a tribe join? So I think that's kind of where the origins of these discussions are happening here in California. And again, if something like official state recognition were to happen, then I think that will come up for sure.
I have 3 questions on food.
Oh, okay.
So 2 of them are regarding the Mutsun statement.
Okay.
So there's one in regards to Mutsun statement on the journey of lands, the wording cites surface lands for this, which allows for huge loophole. We don't have any surface lands. It seems to limit this to co-management only. Any thoughts on how to address this for an otherwise well-intentioned statement?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Something that I thought as well when reading that, and how would the state determine what is surplus? So there's those issues. I think what I mentioned, that $100 million that was allocated for the Tribal Nature-Based Solutions Program, I think those funds are supposed to be, at least in part, used for tribes to purchase, or I don't exactly know how it will work, but like to get, I guess, surplus land, or work with the state to figure out lands that tribes can get back. So I think that maybe that program and those monies will be able to address some of those concerns. So yeah, so I'm interested in seeing how that will play out as well, since some of this is all very new and changing.
Second question. Can you please share more about your perspective policy regarding the return to excess land? Do you find the statement to be a useful mechanism to prevent that, or do you think that's short?
Yeah, I guess I kind of, sort of addressed that in the previous answer, but, it does have, in the other question said, this seems well-intentioned. It's connected to the executive order in 1519 with, the apology. I think when thinking of critiques to it, something that just keeps coming up for me is how would things be
different if these lands or initiatives weren't for like nature-based solution or tribal stewardship or things like that. Like what if it was something else, you know, like tribal business or something, like would there be that same willingness to give land back or whatever it may be? My guess, my educated guess is probably not, just based on all of the American studies scholarship. Where, you know, there are these really deep-seated, ingrained stereotypes or understandings of Native American people, you know, as being connected to nature, and you know, we're supposed to be, you know, in that role of protecting nature, and that is part of our, you know, call and culture and responsibility as Native peoples, but you know, that has been twisted in terms of stereotypes, but and to sort of place us in, you know, the past, and so yeah, so I think about that a lot. What if these initiatives were for something else? Would they even exist? Would there be support for them if it wasn't around nature and, you know, climate change and coast stewardship?
Someone asked, I'm wondering if there's some significant recognition process on East Coast of the Western states.
So I think a lot of that has to do with, well, for some of the states, and again, I'm not an expert on the specifics of each state, but for some of them, I think it goes back to some of the original colonial encounters that happened in the very, you know, early days of the United States and formation of the states. And so that was just a way that the state governments were, had diplomatic relationships with those tribes. That started way back in the early days. And then some of the other states have adopted formal recognition processes later in time, like in the 80s. So I'm not totally sure why it's concentrated on the East Coast in terms of that official state acknowledgement, but that seems like there's opportunities for more of that.
That actually was my question.
Oh, okay.
I think is the image kind of
Yeah.
Is there any reason why East Coast states legislative body more persuaded or coerced into?
I'm not totally sure. It's funny, actually, when I was creating that map, and again, like I said, it was me revisiting geography. I was like, oh wow, all of these are on the East Coast and in the South. But again, I'm sure it has to do with the interactions that the tribes and the states are having. And, you know, also some of the states that have state recognition are in the South also. So I think there's also dynamics of indigeneity and race that are going on there as well that are informing the different relationships with the states. So that, I mean, it is really interesting. And again, there's not a ton of scholarship out there on state recognition, but one of the really good resources is a book chapter in an edited volume by Jeannie O'Brien and Amy Odin. It's called Recognition, Sovereignty Struggles, and Indigenous Rights in the United States. And there's a chapter in there by, I think it's like Alexa Koenig and Jonathan Stein. And so they've been two of the people who've written about state recognition quite a bit. And that's what I was mentioning earlier, where they talk about different types of state recognition. So when there's the types that aren't necessarily through like state legislatures, that those were in other places across the country as well.
I have one more question.
Oh.
I don't know.
Oh yeah, I think there were a couple
Are you out of
other
time?
in the back. Oh, okay. Do you want to ask her a question?
Yeah, I kind of have a question building off of some of the other questions. On the East Coast, like particularly Maine and Quebec, there's like the Mi'kmaq tribe, this discrepancy with citing treaties with the French and never having been recognized by the British or what's like modern day Canada. And they sort of use that as like recognition of their sovereignty. And I'm curious, not being from the West Coast, if there's anything similar with California with like certain treaties or recognition by Spanish colonial forces that have been useful for like state recognition.
Yeah, there weren't any treaties with the Spanish. I think there was a mercantile treaty between the Russians and Kashaya-Pomo. I know some people in the audience are more familiar with that than I am. So I think that there was that, and then I think there was a treaty that was signed, I can't remember which tribes, but with General Vallejo, I think, which was in sort of like that period between Mexican and United States rule over California. But I don't think there's the same examples here. And it's mainly the 18 treaties that were negotiated with the United States government, but that were not ratified in large part because of California state government. And yeah,
like those states on the East Coast and stuff. Something that like for example, are examples of like trying.
I think that some of those states had created, okay, so I think Vermont actually is the most recent, like within the past few years that have, but like I mentioned that some of those states started doing it in like the 1980s and on. So yeah, so this is something that states are still, considering, actively considering today. And I think there's quite a few states that have been having these kind of similar discussions. Thank you. All right, Bill, thank you so much to everyone.
Thank you very, very much. Can we give it one more round of applause, please? That was but our director of the American Indian Resource Center, Angel Rio Tutar, will conclude this event with some final words.
We are going to go over a couple minutes, so I hope everyone's okay with that. That's such a great guest, and we all just want to keep talking because that's what we do best. So my name is Angel Rio Tutar, and my pronouns are she, her, and I'm of mixed descent. I'm an enrolled member of the Chippewa Cree tribe of the Rocky Boys Reservation. And I'm really happy to be here. I am also an alum of UCSC and a former intern at the American Indian Resource Center. I would like to share with you that today is also a day of remembrance for Sophia Garcia Robles. Sophia blessed UCSC with a dedicated 27-year career in the school's financial aid office. And 12 years ago, Sophia passed away tragically on November 5th, 2010. She was actively involved with the American Indian communities, and we wish to demonstrate our deepest appreciation. And I bring Sophia up today because today is her day of remembrance, but it also is a remembrance. Gosh, I don't know why I'm so nervous all of a sudden. It's also a
day and a time that we are in reflection of our ancestors and how we remember them as in the strength that they've given us today to keep moving forward with all the work that we love to do. And so I just want to bring that up because not only that, but our event that we have in the springtime is dedicated to her, to Sophia. So there's a few other things I wanted to share with you today, and I'm going to do it anyways. I would like to share the history of the Native American Heritage Month with all of you in hopes that we will always continue to make history greater for the next generations. So what started at the turn of the century as an effort to gain a day of recognition for the significant contributions the first Americans made to the establishment of the growth of the U.S. has resulted in a whole month being designated for that purpose. One of the very proponents of the American Indian Day was Dr. Arthur C. Parker, a Seneca Indian who was the director of the Museum of Arts and Science in Rochester, New York. He persuaded the Boy Scouts of America to set aside a day for the first Americans, and for 3 years, they adopted such a day. And in 1915, the annual Congress of the American Indian Association, meeting in Lawrence, Kansas, formally approved a plan concerning American Indian Day. It directed its president, Reverend Sherman Coolidge, an Arapaho, to call upon the country to observe such a day. Coolidge issued a proclamation on September 28, 1915, which declared the second Saturday of each May as the American Indian Day and coined the first formal appeal for recognition of Indians as citizens. The year before a proclamation was issued, Red Fox James, a Blackfoot Indian, rode horseback from state to state, seeking approval for a day to honor Indians. So on December 14, 1915, he presented the endorsements of 24 state governments at the White House. There is no record, however, of such a national day being proclaimed. The first American Indian Day in a state was declared on the second Saturday in May 1916 by the governor of New York. Several states celebrate the fourth Friday in September. In Illinois, for example, legislators enacted such a day in 1919. Presently, several states have designated Columbus Day as Native American Day, but it continues to be a day we observe without any recognition as national legal holiday. So in 1990, President George H. Bush approved a joint resolution designating November 1990 National American Indian Heritage Month. Similar proclamations under variants on the name, including Native American Heritage Month, the National American Indian, and Alaska Native Heritage Month, have been issued each year since 1994. So as we continue to embrace moments of history and history in the making, we continue to strengthen our culture, our traditions, and our visions of the future. I would like to also share a few announcements for some upcoming events. Ruth Ann Butler is a filmmaker and an MFA candidate in the social documentation program and has been working with the Amah Mutsun Land Trust for the past year and a half for her thesis project, along with her advisor, Sim Schneider. Land Trust invites a meditative engagement with the land, plants, and those who care for them over the course of 1 year in this ongoing work of many generations. The film will be seen at the Delmar Theater on November 9th at 7 p.m., along with works from this year's and last year's MFA cohorts. The screening is free and open to the public. The film will also be screened on campus at the Simpson Gallery as part of the Frames Per Second exhibition and be available online to attendees of the December 7th panel discussion with the Amah Mutsun Tribal Band members and field participants. I'm going to pass on the names real quick. Next Friday, November 11th, since 2021, Pie Ranch and the Amah Mutsun Land Trust have been working together at the historic Cascade Ranch on the Onondaga Point to propagate native plants for stewardship. Valerie, you have to help me with this. Starts with a Q. Kioste Valley Cultural Preserve. High Ranch has created the Cascade Regeneration Program to support new regenerative agriculture operations that aim to produce foods and other plants in a way that supports the local ecology. As part of the regenerative approach to agricultural land stewardship, High Ranch and the Amah Mutsun Land Trust will be working together with volunteers to remove eucalyptus seedlings and other invasive species along the sensitive riparian corridor of the Cascade Creek at Cascade Ranch on Friday, November 11th. And we would like to invite all the Amah Mutsun Land Trust supporters who are interested to join on this volunteer day. Finally, one more. December 10th, there will be a conference entitled Dancing with the Sea, Land and Fire, Monterey Bay Native Land Management and Food Security. It will be held at the Police Room at the Seymour Marine Discovery Center on December 10th. The conference presents an eco-archaeological research in collaboration with the Amah Mutsun Tribal Band on Monterey Bay Native people's landscape, seascape management, their diet in pre-colonial times, and the ties these native health and food sovereignty today. In closing, I would like to acknowledge the students of UCSC, specifically the students that have chosen to be a part of the American Indian Resource Center. And very, very generous with their time. They are encompassing of their space and resources, and they demonstrate great leadership and resiliency. Each day, they stay focused on their studies and their responsibilities. The event today is evidence of all their effort and time, and I would like for you to know and for them to know that their efforts do not go unnoticed or unacknowledged. I am honored each day to be in your presence. So thank you to Kamiko, our lead intern, Kachani, Jordan, Alex, Andrea, Audrey Alice, Charlie, Teo, and our wonderful program coordinator, Jenzy Ortiz. A huge thank you to Dr. Olivia Chilcote and Chairman Val Lopez, and all of you, our special guests, those in person and those that are viewing online. We appreciate all of you for sharing your time with us today, and can we have a round of applause for all of us?
Thank you for that closing, Angel. Thank you for all the support you give the AIRC staff, and thank you, Jency, for being our Zoom coordinator today. I would like to finish off today's event by doing some plugs for our last event of the quarter, which will be our annual Indigithanks event. This will be held on Thursday, November 17th, and the QR code to register for this event is up on the screen. There's also a link at the bottom of this picture. It says register at bit.ly/AIRC-IT22. We'll be serving a meal, and it'll be in conjunction with the Cowl Coffee Shop, and it will be very, very delicious. A lot of food is going to be sourced from local areas and from the farm at UCSC. So please sign up. Seating is limited, so if you'd like to go as soon as possible, register.
So this event was recorded and it will be uploaded to the AIRC YouTube channel. So if there's any information you missed or something you were just really interested in, you really want to dissect it, it's going to be on the AIRC YouTube channel. And you can stay up to date with the AIRC by following our social media channels and subscribing to our YouTube channels. It's all up there. And you can find us on Instagram at AIRCUCSC, and our YouTube handle is UCSC American Indian Resource Center.
And finally, we would like you to please fill out an evaluation. If you'd like to do it on your phone, you can just scan the QR code on the screen. If not, we will have our interns pass out physical evaluation forms that you can fill out with your pen. And if you cannot complete it now, we will be sending an email to everybody who registered, and the evaluation will be in that email. On another note, if you would like to take any food home, there are to-go boxes in the back, and you're welcome to take food home. And once again, thank you all, and we will see you very soon, and have a great rest of your day.